Today we talk to Lieutenant Bryan Hollingsworth of the Toledo Mounted Patrol. If you ever wanted to know what the Mounted Patrol do, you need to listen.
He even outlined a few funny experiences in the Canter Banter.
Be sure to listen.
Welcome to Late Night Riders. I'm Gretchen, and I'm joined by Lucas, my grandma Debbie, and Lieutenant Hollingsworth.
Hi there.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Could you tell us a little bit about how you got started in horses?
I can. When I was very young, I always enjoyed horses. My mom made me a horse pillow when I was a kid, and always dreamed of owning a horse. Experience on a horse, I rode one time. A friend of my sister's actually was a 4-H rider for horses, so she led me around a paddock one time, just to ride, which
So
was
cute.
and that was about it. And then putting a penny in the machine at Myers every once in a while, I would hop on there and ride those horses.
Mm-hmm.
Any horse I didn't have to control, I was on. So.
So at what point did you join the Mounted Patrol, and were you riding consistently before joining the Mounted Patrol, or was that something that you learned while training for it?
No, we didn't have any training. All of us that went through training at the time didn't have any training. I started with the police department in 2001 and was on the street as a patrol officer from 2002 until the bid came out in 2006, where I could ask to be part of the mounted unit, and they did interviews, looked at our sick time usage and that kind of stuff. Then they selected 9 of us to go through training. And I was selected as one of those 9 people to go through training.
Now, did Mounted Patrol, was that appealing to you, or was that just to get into a different part of the police academy?
No, I was very interested in it. Actually, one of the reasons I wanted to go to Toledo was because they had a unit, a mounted unit. When I was hired, I was hoping someday to either be on the Harbor Patrol or be on the Mounted Patrol.
So where did they send you for training?
We trained at Vale Meadows.
Okay.
A sergeant prior to the sergeant that we had at the time, Mike McGee, is part of the Vale family through marriage, and so we did all of our training. It's a long and extensive training. I'm not sure if we'll talk about that later, but it's an extensive training, and we were out there for 10 weeks, 40 hours a week for 10 weeks.
Wow.
Did you feel very confident at that point once you got done with training and were out? Or did you feel was it still a learning curve after those 10 weeks?
And after 10 weeks, I was confident on the horse. But then you go from taking your ability riding a horse, and 400 hours in 2 months is a lot of time in the saddle.
Yeah.
So your confidence is built up, and I had basically ridden my horse the whole time. So he and I were kind of leading the blind. He was 3 years old and didn't neck rein when I started. So while I was going through training, he and I learned how to neck rein together and that kind of stuff. So he and I was very confident with he and I together as a horse and rider. But then you take that and apply the things you've done in a sterilized environment, and then you put it into the real world, out with real people that are walking around you, and balloons are hitting your horse in the face and that kind of, at the Mud Hen Stadium and that kind of stuff. So that was a struggle. It took me a long time to become more confident doing that.
Did you pick your horse for this purpose, or did you have him before this, or
the city owned all the horses?
Oh, okay.
My horse was a little bit different because all the rest of them had been owned, and there were already 4 people on the unit at the time, and so the rest of them were riding horses that were already established. Rookie had been bought and had stood in a stall from September till we started training in November. He was brought in from some pasture in Kentucky with. He's a Tennessee walker, and he had the big, heavy shoes on when he first came to us.
Wow.
And he stood around in a stall and out in the paddock for 2 or 3 months until we started training.
He's quite you two together. It's quite a story because that's you know, both kind of green. Let's put it that way.
Yes.
I mean, in what you were going into,
Right.
but you had to feel like you've grown together. Then.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Which
That
has
you've
really
gone
built the
through.
relationship between he and I, and
Sure.
was fun to be part of.
Boy,
So
I just want to say, if you can have one good relationship with a horse, even in your lifetime, I mean, not just one good one, but I mean that real, I know what you're going to do, zig and zag together. That's a really awesome thing. So
I was gonna ask, day one of training, like, what was that like?
yeah, yeah.
Have you ever seen a magician or somebody in a show try and spin plates and keep a bunch of plates spinning?
Yes.
That's the analogy that Sergeant McGee used for us, because there were 9 or 10 of us going through training, and none of us had horse experience. And
oh my goodness.
it was all bareback. So
Oh my goodness.
our training before we got on the horse was
Crazy.
he held up a set of reins, connected to a halter, and said, "Okay, this is, if you pull this way, the horse is gonna go left. If you pull this way, it's gonna go right. And if you pull back, he's gonna kind of stop."
Sure.
So, and that was all we. And,
That's all you knew.
And squeeze him to make him go faster.
You have got to
So-
be kidding me. That is crazy. You are
So-
one brave person.
Yeah. So, the first 3 days it was all bareback.
Oh my
And we first just started
goodness.
walking around, and rookie is new, and so you take somebody who's not ridden a horse before and put him on a new young horse that's a little bit anxious, and so as you start to get a little uncomfortable, not knowing what you're doing, you're gonna try and hold on. What are we used to holding on
Yeah.
with? You hold on with your hands.
Yeah.
So you start pulling with the reins. Well, then Rookie didn't like that because I'm pulling on his mouth. Now I know that I'm pulling on his mouth, but I'm just trying to stay on top.
Mm-hmm.
And so then when that doesn't work, then you squeeze your legs, and when you squeeze your legs, so
Go
you're
forward.
you're telling the
Take
horse
off.
to move forward, and you're telling him to
Yo,
go 15
go.
different directions at a time. And
Oh my gosh.
so at one point, Rookie just stood up and said, "I'm done with you," and I slid off the back, and so
Whoa.
we got back on and tried again.
So
but
a few
it was-
discussions together, the two of
we
you.
did.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely.
So was it like basic rider skills for the first couple weeks, and then it got into the actual like bringing the
Training?
police training into it,
Mhm.
or
probably
was
the
that...
first most of the first month was just learning how to ride a horse, because we kind of like having people that don't have much horse experience, because most people either ride one discipline or the other. So they'll either ride Western or they'll ride English, and they don't cross very much. And we ride police, so we use both, because we ride one-handed, so we can have the other hand free.
Oh wow. Okay.
So
wow.
we ride one-handed, but we do, which is like Western riding, but then we do a lot of commands with our legs, which is more like English riding. And so, so people that come in, if they're used to English riding, it's difficult for them to add the Western part of it with the English stuff. So it's worked out. It always worked out usually better if they didn't have much horse experience.
Did the people that trained with you, they did not have previous horse experience, did you say as well too, or did some of them have? A
No,
bit.
we all were green.
Okay.
Yep.
So after that first month, you guys are all settled in. You guys move into like desensitizing them so you can fire weapons, or
How did that go?
We
Your
actually never
training?
got to the point with our horses, because to actually desensitize a horse to shoot from the top of them is a huge process. And in our 10 weeks, we didn't get to that. So we were just always, the truth is we were always hoping we wouldn't have to combine
Yeah.
those two, because it was probably not going to go well for any of us. But yes, in part of our training was somewhat desensitizing as we went through, because as we moved off of bareback and started riding, then as we got comfortable walking, we're there for 8 hours a day. So we would put some desensitizing things in there, introduce tarps and that kind of stuff, and the horses that we had, some of the horses that we had that were ours, owned by the city, had already ridden on the street, except for Rookie. So they were used to a lot of that stuff. So I think it was 2003 our unit had went to Lexington, Kentucky to a competition down there. We had an older horse named Blue, and Blue led the charge, and our unit got second place in the entire nation. And most of it was desensitizing, having to walk through obstacles and that kind of stuff. And so
Wow.
they actually were asked by the Louisville Police Department to come work the
Oh, wow.
the Derby, to help
Oh,
with the
wow.
Derby. They didn't go, but they were actually
Nice.
invited by the Louisville Police Department in Louisville, Kentucky, to work the Kentucky Derby.
So in your training, you said that we know you've ridden bareback. The first month was learning, riding basically. And then what happened after that then? Like what type of training was this for more like I'm probably not going to say it right, like crowd control or like events and that type of thing? So could you tell us about that?
I can. We're trained to do everything off the back of a horse that you do out of a police car.
Oh.
Is the simple way to say it. So, write parking tags. I've stopped cars and written speeding tickets to people. I've ridden to different places and tie him up to a dumpster and walk in and get information for a report.
Yeah.
One of the things we really did a lot of was parking tags, because we worked the downtown area, and so most of the downtown area was still patrolled by us. So we wrote a lot of parking tags, and you just write the tag, lean over, hanging, and not ever get off your horse and stuff.
That's what I was going to ask you. You're on and off a lot, or just on your horse leaning over?
Nope.
Because Rookie is very tall. He's a very tall horse. He's
Yes.
big. He's
Yep.
beautiful.
No, the only time we get off was if we were going to tie him up to go into. I would tie him off to go into a building, or if we were going to eat, we would sometimes tie him off and go into a restaurant and then come back. But while we were working, we were on top of the horse.
Were people respectful, like with the fact that if you tied them somewhere, did you have people that kind of came around, or was that just, did you find that they kind of stayed away from him, or was it kind of in a place that wasn't really?
No, they were usually respectful. They would ask. I mean, people love horses, so they would ask if they could come up to him and pet him or whatever. But if they weren't around, we would kind of keep an eye on him, and most people stayed away from him. So you would see him every once in a while come up and try and pet him. But
I think they can be intimidating, or people love them. Can we pet
Yes.
the horse, right? So I
Right.
wondered how that was, how you all kind of, whether there have to be certain times where you said no and other times where you said yes, you can, I'm sure, or whatever. I don't know how you did that.
yeah, it was kind of fun, especially with Rookie. And I'll speak mostly about him because I rode him all the time. But one of our biggest jobs once we were out on the street was security around the Mud Hen Stadium. So we would ride circles, and at the beginning of the game and at the end of the game, there's tons of people coming in, and so we would often, 2 or 3 of us would stop at the home plate gate, and then there's a center field gate too, and so we would stop there, and people would just come and they would just come and ask them if they could they could pet the horse, and then there might be 30 kids standing around, and Rookie would put his head down, and he would just he'd stand there, and
Love, isn't it?
he would. But then as soon as I would sit up and change my position,
Business.
he would know that it was time to do that. Oh, it's work time, and then he would pull his head up, and he would stand up. He would stand up straight, and then he would stand there straight the whole time I was doing work, and then we went back to, and he realized it was petting time, and then he would just relax, put his head down, and so.
Nice.
Did you find that it was easier to patrol on horseback rather than in car, like when you were doing tickets and things like that?
There are things that it's much easier to do on a horse than in a car. Tons of things. You drive down a residential street in a car, and nobody cares. You ride a horse down a residential street, and kids are coming from every house you walk by. Can I pet your horse? And so, great PR tool. Getting through downtown was often easier on horse. If you had to go a long distance, obviously it's a little more challenging because they had metal shoes on with cleats welded to the bottom, but it's still metal on asphalt, so it was always kind of an interesting time. But our big thing was our biggest ability is crowd control and that kind of stuff. So we would say that as a mounted officer, I can do the same job in a crowd as 10 officers on the ground.
Wow.
We taught them part of our training was learning how to make them side pass, leg yield, and I could turn Rookie sideways on a sidewalk, and he would side pass for me until I told him to stop.
Wow.
I've done it.
He's a good guy.
I've leg yielded him for 60 or 70 yards at a time.
Wow.
And he just 1 foot after. I mean, it took us a while to get to that point. But,
Right. That's unbelievable. Just like scooching across, like,
Yep.
pushing back. And
Yep.
that's a big thing to go that far and that long. So
Yep.
do you feel also too, like I was thinking about it, when you're up on a horse though, you see so much more.
You do see more. Yeah, absolutely.
You have to you've got a better view of everything, don't
Yes.
you?
And one of the things our horses had to be at least 16 hands tall, or we
Okay.
wouldn't accept them, because part of what we're doing is getting up there so people can see.
Sure.
We can see what's going on in the crowd. But yes, you can see 6 or 7 rows back in a crowd. That,
Yeah.
the guy that thinks he's in the back and unseeable and trying to chuck stuff or throw stuff at you can see him. They're trying to create problems. You can see him and point him out. And
Did
get
you
to
have
him.
that happen often, like people throwing things at you because you're on horseback? Or
I
Heard
did
about that,
not.
too.
But we talked a little bit earlier about the riots in '05, and they were throwing everything then, and all the horses have are shields over their eyes and the officer on their back, and things were being thrown then. None of them got serious, none of them got injured, but there were things flying around, and part of what they were able to do was see the people that were throwing and be able to point them out to
So that
people.
played
to
a
make the
pivotal
arrests.
role in that day.
It did help, yes. Yep. Yeah. So
Seems like it would work well now too with the pro Medica concerts going on
would
and
think
the
so, too.
walleye and the mud hens,
Party in the park type things. Yes, I would
the
think
zombie
so.
bar crawl.
yeah, those were some of the most fun days. As a matter of opening day and 4th of July, would be on our horses usually from sometime around 11:30 or 12 till 11:30 or 12 at night, and usually by about 12:30, Rookie had been offered his first beer from someone's tailgate in the parking lot.
That's funny.
It took him till about 3:30 to offer me my first beer, so he was gonna offer the first one first. So, but
So speaking of the 4th of July, was there previous training that you did with like louder noises, that type of thing with the horses?
we
then?
did do quite a bit of louder noise training. We would actually stand in formation, and they would shoot fireworks, bottle rockets, and Roman
Right.
candles and stuff off.
The first time I can't imagine what that was like everybody in formation, or
Yeah.
did they do pretty well?
They did. They did okay, and we all stayed on top. We'll say it that way.
Stayed topside. There you go.
But it took us a while, but we did that a lot because there were times that we would stay on them for the 4th of July and for the mud hens. When I was working, the mud hens would do fireworks every Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and sometimes a Monday night. And so some days we would be out there on our horses when the fireworks were going off, and so they had to be comfortable with loud noises and with bright lights and those kind of things.
Yeah, it's a big deal. What about like cars? Did you do things so that the horns and honking, things like that? Was that another? Did you do things with cars also too for training with them as well?
We did, because you're riding in the street on a downtown
Right.
street. So I would ride Rookie right down Erie Street and traffic going by, and so you have to gradually
Trucks,
introduce them to that.
Horns, yeah.
So we would, Vale Meadows is out in Oregon, out toward Pearson Park, and so we would take them along that road a little bit to get them used to it, and then smaller areas. We started out in residential areas where there's a car here or there, and let them get a little excited until they build. And the big thing is that people that know horses know, and I didn't really understand this until I started riding, but the more your horse trusts you, the more you can get away with, and the more you can do, and the more they'll do. And so once Rookie learned, after so much time of me pushing him and putting him in situations he didn't like and us making it through it, he trusted me, and it came to the point where I trusted him more than I've trusted most of my human partners on the street. I was just as comfortable with him as a partner as anybody else. So it was fun.
So were you primarily only doing mounted patrol, or were you also doing stuff on the street as well?
So we were one of the few full-time units in the state at the time. So we rode down to, our rules were we would ride up to 90 degrees and we would ride down to about 35 degrees. 35 to 40 degrees. So if it was within there and it was dry, we would ride. And then there were 8 or 9 of us, so 6 or 7 of us would be working at a time often. So if we had 6 or 7, a couple of us would cover the downtown area, and I enjoyed working downtown. And Rookie was fine downtown, so we could do whatever we wanted to while we were down there. So I liked staying downtown. There was a lot of people. We could do a lot of activity. And then some would put them on a trailer and sometimes go to Point Place or sometimes go out to West Toledo and ride through the neighborhoods and, stop and talk to people as they come out in the street and those kind of things. So
I can't imagine the process of going from training, then going right downtown or where you did go, that point of like, now this is it. And personally, I'm sure you were confident, but at the same time too, I'm sure that, you're like, what's going to be happening or whatever. How did was that a smooth, easy transition, or how did that, work for you then?
Well, I don't know that I could say it was a smooth transition. I tried to make it a smooth transition, but like Sergeant McGee told us when we started training, every day is a training day. So every day your horse is going to learn something about you, and you're going to learn something about your horse.
Yes.
And so the big thing I think for us that worked was Rookie and I had such a good relationship that he trusted me and didn't get overly excited no matter what was going on.
You went off of your cue, and basically that's the thing, that once you learn and you're confident, your horse can depend on that, right? Yeah.
And I had done police work for 4 years before, so I knew how to be a policeman, and I knew how to ride a horse by that time. So then it was just combining the two and helping Rookie understand what police work was. What was the transition, and there were some bumps in the road along the way, but we made it through it, and yeah.
Do you feel like he enjoyed what he did then? For
he
the
did.
time he did. He liked his job.
Yes. Yep. He would get excited when I came in the morning, and as we got him ready, and I was kind of particular about him and pretty protective of him, and so I would come in, and almost every day he got sprayed down and grew, and I would brush him out very well, and just he and I both took pride in who we were, right, and what we were out there to represent, and so he would really, and you could see that he was excited to go to work.
Nice.
Yeah.
So what gear did you guys have, and like what did you pack along with you for the day whenever you would go out? So
all we would carry is basically just one saddlebag. It's kind of more like a saddle pack that just sat behind our saddle, nothing on the side or anything. And all I would have is I would take my book of parking tags, would go in there, and traffic citations, and then some minor things that might come up that I might need for him, and a lead, so that if we decided to stop somewhere, we could tie him up. And then we had reflective bands for their ankles. So I kept those in there all the time in case I happened to be riding and got stuck out there for a while. I could put those on for him if it started getting dark. And that was basically it. Everything else if we needed something else, we would call for a crew, and have someone in a car would bring it to us, or if somebody was back at the barn, we'd have them running a truck out to us. So
interesting.
Did you bring a lot of water with you?
Yeah.
No, we would take them back to the barn to give them a drink. If it was hot, then about every 45 minutes or so we would take them back and let them get a drink and get off them for a little bit so they could cool down a little bit and not over.
How close were you? What was your radius then from the barn approximately? Like you kind of could go out and knew, okay, it's time to come back then, because if you went out a distance?
We went further probably sometimes than would have been recommended by some.
I see.
Our barn was south of the Mud Hen Stadium down at South St. Clair in Lafayette, and my partner and I rode our horses all the way to Point Place and back one day.
Wow, that's a long
So,
distance.
yeah,
Long
it
distance.
took us a while to get there
Wow.
and back, but it was a cool day. So we were just
Scenic
out
route.
checking things out. Yeah.
Do you feel that there were times where you'd say, it was so rewarding to be able to have done that? Is there an experience that you could tell us about that, you felt you knew that this was a good thing, or that the people had appreciated it so much, or the rewarding side of it? Or is it kind of one of those jobs that you're out there, you're doing it, and people don't notice, but you see the difference?
It definitely was a rewarding job. I think one of my most rewarding times was when I was on the mounted unit. My daughter was in elementary school at Holloway Elementary, and I took Rookie to her school, and every class in her school came out during the day. I was there for the whole day, and every classroom in her school got to come out and go through a presentation. I took them through a presentation on mounted work and what we did as police officers on horses, and a lot of them didn't have horse background, so I'd give them a lot, some facts and stuff about horses, and then we would always arrest a teacher, which the kids absolutely adored.
I bet they loved it.
Yeah, that was a blast. And there aren't many dads that get to have that kind of an experience with their kid, and so I really enjoy. I know it seems selfish, and I apologize for my selfishness, but that's probably my most rewarding story was being able to do that.
Yeah.
No, and I think then the children learn that they don't have to be, worried, or it's something that's good, that
Right.
teaches them good things. So I think
Well, and that's
great.
just it. Yeah.
Right.
Because policemen are not always looked at as nice and kind, and most of us are. The majority of us are good people and really care about people, but especially more recently, the portrayal of police officers has not been necessarily positive.
Yeah.
And so any opportunity we would get to, and I have people, we talked before about being at the home plate gate for the mounted unit. I've had countless number of parents come with their kids, and they would stop and they would talk to me while their kids are petting a horse, and they would tell me, we come to the Bunheads games to see the horses. Our kids really don't pay attention to the game, but once we tell them we're going and they know they're going to see the horses, that's their whole thing.
That's
and
neat.
so, yeah, so it was a huge PR tool we were able to use at the time.
So is this something that is dwindling nationwide? Are mounted patrols starting to go down left and right? Because I feel like it's something important that would be nice to keep around.
I think it is,
especially.
too.
I mean, I know New Orleans and stuff like that still has it going on, but I don't know nationwide.
Most of the bigger cities still have them. Their use, like I said before, we were one of the few fully operational units that worked year round, but the big three in Ohio still have some semblance of mounted. I believe Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati still all have some kind of mounted patrol. But as numbers are harder to get just for policemen,
right,
to just hire policemen is getting difficult now. So as those numbers begin to dwindle, it won't surprise me if we don't see more and more units going by the wayside, because departments can't afford to have people off the street as much as they might be, or they become just event units, and it's difficult to not be riding your horse every day in that setting, and then one day take them and stick them in it and say, okay, you've not been doing this for a month and a half, but now we need you to come do this, and so that makes it difficult. So I'm hoping that's not the case, but it won't surprise me if it does happen.
All right.
So where is Rookie now?
Rookie is at our house. He's pretty excited because we're getting a barn. We're having a barn built right now. And
exciting time.
Yeah,
Very exciting time.
He and his buddy Tyson have just had a run-in shed for a couple years, and so they're gonna have a barn. They can actually get out of the rain and the snow and all that kind of stuff and not walk in. So he's right on our property, and
nice.
sometime you guys have to stop out and see him. And
We'd love
Yeah,
to.
we'd love to.
And you chose fencing. What type of fencing did you choose? Actually,
we have the Protect braid,
Okay.
the braided rope.
Okay. Yep.
From RAMM actually.
Are you liking it?
We
And-
love it.
Nice.
Yeah, I like it a lot. It's easy to maintain. It's held up well. It's been up for 2 or 3 years now, and I haven't even had to tighten it yet. And so
I have one question. I don't know if we're down to then, probably getting to then. This is kind of a funny question, but when I have ridden different places on the road, I have to be careful. Like, I'll go back if the horse, goes to the bathroom. I mean, I'll go back and pick that up. I know that's a funny question. I know. But, you're in the city. So I just wondered, how did you, because people are kind of particular about that, and I'm sure the city wanted to be careful with it. Were there people there to help for some cleanup or that type of thing? I know that's a funny question, but, just wondered.
Oh, it's a question we get asked all the time.
Okay.
And you asked it much more polite than most people do.
Oh, I don't.
So.
I've done it with my own horse, but I'll go back with a shovel and clean up. I think it's respectful to do that, but sometimes you don't know when that's going to happen, so it just happens, and you have to go back.
Yes. So our rule was if it was in the street, the street cleaner would get it.
Okay.
Because we had automated street cleaners that clean the street every once in a while.
Sure.
So
that
if
wasn't
you
too
ever saw
troublesome
us,
for people.
if you ever saw us hurrying our horse into the street,
yes,
you
were
might
trying to
find
get
that
into the
happening.
street.
You
see.
might find that happening very soon.
Okay.
Because if it was on the sidewalk,
Yeah.
then we had to either get off and kick it into the street or go back and get a bucket and come back and scoop it up.
See, I wonder, because that is something that, people, they just aren't, we don't live in that day and age where people are used to that, and out of respect for others, try to do that. So that's interesting.
Nope. So that was our rule. And if it was, sometimes we would do it even in the street if it was a busy area, like 4th of July or something like that. If we had time, we would clean it up even in the street because there's a lot of people walking back and forth. But for the most part, we left it in the street and got it off the sidewalk.
Were there other rules that maybe aren't quite so obvious to us that you knew that you did with your horse at certain times, or that you were, that you did, or was it just basically did you stay on the sidewalk, or did you go? Were there specifics with that then, or?
No, we would walk wherever.
Okay.
And one of the things that we had to, you talk about obstacles and desensitization. Rookie hated grates, sewer grates, and they're all over downtown Toledo.
Yeah.
And so we spent in our transition period, we spent a lot of time walking over grates and back around and walking over grate because we would do whatever. I needed him to be able to go wherever I told him to go, whenever I told him to go. Because if, and the way we would joke about it in training, we would have to go through cone courses. And if you stepped on a cone, you stepped on somebody's baby. And so you've got to get used to keep them in small areas in case you're walking through through a dense crowd and there's a lot of people. So we walk them everywhere, but usually we would walk them in the street a lot for the reason I just gave you, that if that's where they choose to do their business, that it's in the street.
I think another thing that's hard, like I've noticed with our horses and things, and nothing against parents, please don't, that's not the point, but baby strollers and things kind of horses can kind of get, whoa, with baby strollers. So you do have to be careful with, mothers or children in baby strollers if they come up and happen to kind of get a little too close to the horse. You got to watch for things like that with people that don't know anything about horses, I'm sure. Yes.
Yep, and that's exactly right. And Rookie would stand there, but he wasn't a fan of balloons. And so, you go into a Mud Hens game, or you go to, you come in and you got all these hands, and so there might be 30 balloons, so I would usually take my cues from Rookie, and he could take it for a little bit. He would, he'd be okay, but you could tell, and he would start kind of moving his head and kind of look, not specifically looking at me, but he would be communicating to me, you better do something about this, or I'm going to do something about it. And so then, I would say, can you at least keep your balloons from hitting my horse in the face and that kind of stuff? And so, but he was very good and gave plenty of time. But yeah, there were times that you'd have to just remind people he is an animal, and he's a well-trained animal, but he still has feelings, and he still has emotions, and he still deals with frustrations, and so
I would think just your presence alone, being a police officer, to me, I was raised a little different, but it's great respect, but then being on a horse as well would be, to me, like watch your distance, and I I don't know if hopefully you saw that with people, but I would think, to me, it's a very respectful thing, and I really appreciate all that you did do, and all the work that you do as a police officer. Means an awfully lot to me, so I really commend you for what you did and what you're doing.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah.
Thanks for appreciating it.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll enter our next segment, Canter Banter.
Do you love horses and live the equestrian lifestyle? Be sure to check out our brand new blog at www.yourhorsefarm.com. We publish 3 posts per week and feature a free printable equine checklist every month. Yourhorsefarm.com is a great equine online resource, so be sure to share with all the horse lovers in your life. And remember, laugh much and ride often. Our next segment, Canter Banter, is brought to you by RAMM Horse Fencing and Stalls, the one-stop shop for your horse farm. RAMM is family-owned and operated and has been in business for over 30 years. We welcome you to call in and speak with an expert about your next project today at 866-653-8984. Again, that's 866-653-8984.
On this segment of Canter Banter, we're going to hear a story about training with the Mounted Patrol. So, you guys were setting up poles, and one of your trainees was going through them. And can you explain kind of what happened?
Certainly. People that know police officers know that we're pretty competitive, and so part of our training we would do different competitions to try and push each other and get better. And one day we're doing pole bending for our competition, and there were 8 of us sitting behind the arena rail, watching as each of us competed. And one of my fellow trainees was riding our fastest horse and one of our tallest horses, one of the 2 tallest horses we had at the time. Very powerful, very strong, very funny horse named Renegade. And so he's the horse you want to be on if you're going to do something speed related, because he was the fastest. So one of my training buddies decided to take Renegade through the poles, and so he did pretty well going through to the end, where he turned Renegade back around. And we had learned that horses are herd bound, and so when they see they're going to get to go back with their buddies, they pick up the pace a little bit. And so my training partner decided to just let Renegade basically go. And I myself and a friend of mine were watching, and both of us said to each other, I don't think I'd let Renegade get that fast in this arena. There's only so much room, and but he did, and so he was probably going to win. And but there's an end to the arena at some point. It wasn't an open air arena, so as we came to the end, he didn't realize that Renegade wasn't gonna just run into the wall. And so at the last minute, Renegade took a quick turn to the left, and my training partner decided to fly off. I don't think he decided to. It was decided for him.
Momentum, or had been built up.
Yeah, that whole physics lesson of momentum.
Yeah, momentum.
And so he went flying off the horse, and we just hear this big guttural as he flies off the horse and into the end wall of the arena. And so we made sure he wasn't dead. And then we laughed pretty hard.
I bet you had fun with that one.
We did have fun with that one.
Yeah.
And so the next morning when we came into training, someone had taken some paint, and everyone knows the old days of crime scenes, painting around body, putting chalk marks around bodies. So we came into the arena the next morning, and there was a body painted on the end wall of the arena. So we left it there. We had a couple weeks before graduation, and then it was still there when we had our mounted graduation.
Oh my! That's such good fun.
And we got a cake for the mounted graduation, and we put that picture on the cake.
Oh my gosh!
So it was all the people that came through after graduation. Our family and friends came through, and they saw the body on the wall, and then they saw the body on the cake.
Funny.
We were able to tell the story and
funny.
make fun of them once again.
Good camaraderie.
Yeah.
Good fun.
Oh,
Lots of good fun.
Yes, we did have lots of fun.
Well, thank you for coming in and taking time to record with us.
Oh, you're very welcome.
We hope you listen to our podcast and encourage you to share with all your equestrian family and friends. You can tune into the Late Night Riders podcast show every Friday night. Each episode will be uploaded exclusively on YouTube, where you can subscribe to our channel to stay up to date with all of our latest shows. Do you have a topic you'd like to discuss? We want to hear from you. You may email us at podcast@ramfence.com or feel free to leave a comment below. Thank you again for listening. Thank you.
So again, we just commend you for your work with the police
Oh, you're
and all
welcome.
that you do.
Thank you.
And we appreciate it, and we very much respect you, so thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.